In the quiet town of Mabuli, where the streets turned golden every evening and the breeze carried the smell of roasted groundnuts, there lived an old woman named Mama Elise. People said she had lived there longer than anyone could remember. Her house stood at the corner of Boma Street, a small, faded yellow home with cracked walls and a window that faced the road like a watching eye. Every evening, just as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the street, Mama Elise would pull her wooden chair to that window and sit, ill, silent, patient, as if waiting for something only she could understand. Her presence was so consistent that people set their clocks by her. The shopkeeper across the street would say, "Ah, 5 o'clock. Mama Elise must be at her window now." Children walking home from school would whisper, "There she is. Don't make noise, she doesn't like it." Even the motorbike riders slowed down when passing her house, not out of fear but out of respect. She sat with her back straight, wrapped in the same soft lilac shawl she had worn for years. Her eyes, deep, dark and tired, looked out onto the street like they were searching for a face she had memorized long ago. But she never waved, never called out to anyone, never smiled. She simply watched. Some evenings, the golden sunset painted her face with a warm glow, and for a moment she looked almost peaceful. Other days, when clouds gathered and the light dimmed, her silhouette appeared lonely, like a forgotten statue carved from silence. No one knew why she sat there. The neighbors whispered stories, each one more dramatic than the last. Maybe she's waiting for her husband to return from war. No, she once lost a child. They say she sits there hoping he'll walk back home. I heard she's guarding her house from someone who promised to come back for revenge. But gossip, as it always does, drifted and faded with time. Only Mama Elise knew the truth. And she guarded it like a sacred secret. Some people felt pity for her. Others felt annoyance. But one person, a 15-year-old boy named Tunde, felt something else entirely: curiosity. From the first day he noticed her, he felt there was something about the old woman's eyes that pulled him in. They weren't empty. They weren't sad. They held a story heavy enough to bend a person's soul. Every evening, as he walked past her house with a school bag slung over one shoulder, he would glance up at her window. And every time she was there, staring through the glass at the world she never stepped into anymore. The whole neighborhood seemed to accept her routine as normal. But Tunde, he couldn't. He felt that something was off. As if Mama Elise wasn't just watching the street. She was waiting for someone who might never come. And little did he know, he was about to become a part of the story she had spent a lifetime holding inside. Tunde was not the kind of boy who paid attention to old people. He was spirited, restless, always running, always laughing too loudly for the comfort of the quiet neighborhood. But something about Mama Elise had caught him, like a hook in his chest he couldn't shake loose. First it was just glances. He'd walk past her window and steal a quick look. Then he started slowing down, pretending to tie his shoelaces right across the street just to get a better view of her face. Finally, he began waiting, lingering, pacing, pretending to be busy. Also, he could observe the strange ritual of the woman who sat by the window. He noticed things no one else cared to see. She always opened her window exactly when the first evening bird sang its closing note. She always touched the frame gently, her fingers trembling as though the wood carried memories. And every single day before sitting down, she whispered something too soft for anyone else to hear. Tunde longed to know what she whispered. Was it a prayer? A name? Promise? He told himself he didn't care, but he did. One late afternoon, as he walked home with dust on his shoes and schoolbooks heavy in his bag, he saw Mama Elise open her window earlier than usual. Her movement was slower, strained, like the world weighed a little more that day. She placed her hand on the sill and paused for a long time before taking her seat. Tunde felt a wave of concern he didn't understand. Why did it matter to him? Why did this old woman, whom he had never spoken to, suddenly feel important? That evening, as the sun melted into an orange river in the sky, he found himself unable to leave. His feet stopped moving. his heart beating faster for reasons he couldn't name. He leaned against a tree and pretended to look at his phone, though his eyes rose again and again toward her window. She stared out, expression unreadable, but something in the air felt heavy. He could feel it, like a storm that wasn't in the clouds but in someone's heart. The next day at school, he couldn't concentrate. His mind drifted back to her window, to her stillness, her silence. His friends teased him, saying, "Tunde, are you thinking about a girl?" If only they knew he was thinking about someone old enough to be their great-grandmother. When he walked home that afternoon, he didn't even pretend anymore. He stopped right in front of her house. He watched her through the glass, her shawl neatly draped, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on some faraway thought. She didn't blink much, and something about that scared him, because eyes that don't blink are holding something in. Regret, or a memory that refuses to die. For the first time, Tunde wondered if she was waiting for someone she truly loved, or for someone who had broken her so deeply that she couldn't let go. That question, that mystery, hooked him completely. And from that day onward, his curiosity was no longer a passing interest. It became a mission, a silent promise to uncover the truth behind the old woman by the window. There are silences that feel peaceful, like the hush of dawn or the gentle pause before rain. And then there are silences that feel heavy, the kind that settle in a room like invisible smoke, tightening the air, making your chest feel small. That was the silence surrounding Mama Elise's house. The afternoon Tunde finally gathered the courage to step closer. He felt it immediately. The moment he reached her rusted gate, the world suddenly seemed too quiet. Even the birds perched on the wires above had paused their chirping, as if they too sensed something sacred, something untouchable inside those old walls. Tunde placed his hand on the gate. It creaked softly, a frail, tired sound that matched the house itself. He walked slowly toward her front door, feeling each step echo deeper in his chest. For the first time he realized he wasn't just curious anymore. He was concerned, truly deeply concerned. The curtains by the window fluttered as if caught by a faint breath of wind. And there she was, Mama Elise, sitting in her wooden chair. Her posture was as straight as always, but today her eyes looked different, darker, distant, as if she was reaching for a memory that refused to be touched. Tunde stood there unsure. Should he knock? Should he call out? Would she be angry, frightened, annoyed? Before he could think further, Mama Elise slowly turned her head toward him. Their eyes met through the thin curtain. For a brief moment it felt like time stopped. Her gaze wasn't sharp or questioning. It wasn't warm either. It was empty. Not the emptiness of someone who had nothing inside, but the emptiness of someone who had lost too much. Tunde swallowed hard. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Good evening, Mama." She blinked once, slowly. Then she looked away, turning back toward the road, as though whatever she was waiting for mattered more than anything else in the world. But even in that simple movement, Tunde sensed something fragile, like she was made of thin glass and one wrong touch could make her shatter. He stepped backward, unsure of what to do. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something small on the ground near her window, a folded piece of paper. It looked like it had fallen from her lap, perhaps unnoticed. The wind nudged it toward the corner of the wall. His instincts told him to pick it up, but something in the heaviness of the moment stopped him. This wasn't the time. This wasn't his place. Tunde walked away, but every step felt heavier than the last. He could still feel her eyes on him, or perhaps the memory of them. And though she hadn't spoken a single word, he felt as though she had told him something. A message hidden inside her silence. A silence thick with longing, regret, and years of unspoken stories. That night, Tunde lay awake longer than usual. He kept thinking of her window, her eyes, the paper on the ground, and the emptiness that clung to her like a shadow she could never escape. He didn't know it yet, but that silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, was the doorway to the truth he was slowly stepping into. The evening started like any other in Mabuli. Warm, dusky, and painted with the orange glow that made the rooftops look like they were holding fire. Tunde rushed home from school, his backpack bouncing behind him, his eyes already searching for the familiar figure in the window. He didn't know when it happened, but somewhere over the past few weeks, Mama Elise had become a part of his day. Part of his thoughts, part of his quiet inner world. Almost like a story he was reading, except the pages were real, and the ending was still hidden. As he approached the corner, he slowed down. It was 5 p.m. Time she always appeared. Every single. But today, the window was empty. The brown curtain hung still, untouched. The wooden chair by the window was missing. The soft glow of her lamp was absent. The house felt darker than usual, not because the sun had set, but because something was wrong inside. Tunde blinked hard. Maybe he was a little early. He checked his phone. 5:03 p.m. He should be there. He walked closer, unease crawling up his spine. The neighborhood felt different too. Even the street seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. A group of women selling vegetables nearby whispered to each other, stealing glances toward the house. A man sweeping dust from his storefront paused, his broom frozen mid-air. Tunde felt something cold settle in his stomach. He crossed the street and stood in front of the window. Still empty. He had never seen the window empty. Not once. Not in all these years. Not in anyone's memory. He took a shaky breath and stepped toward her gate. He pushed it open and heard that familiar tired creak. But this time the sound didn't feel like a greeting. Felt like a warning. As he approached the front door, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. The folded paper he had seen yesterday was still lying on the ground. Exactly where it had been. No one had picked it up. Not even her. Tunde's heart thumped. He reached down slowly and picked up the paper. It was light, old and soft at the edges, as if touched too many times. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. Photograph slipped out. An old, faded photograph of a young woman holding a baby. The woman looked like Mama Elise. Younger, smiling gently, eyes full of hope. And the child, a tiny boy with round cheeks and bright eyes. Tunde gasped. He didn't know why, but the child's face felt important. Familiar, even. He looked at the house again. Dark. Silent. Motionless. Something had happened. Something big. Something that had finally broken the routine she held onto with the strength of a lifetime. He knocked on the door. Gently at first, then harder, then with fear rising in his throat. No answer. No movement. Tunde pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing. And then, just as he stepped back, a voice behind him whispered. She didn't come to the window today because something happened last night. Tunde spun around, and his world changed forever. Tunde's heart leaped into his throat as he turned around. Standing a few steps behind him was Aunty Mae, one of the oldest residents of Mabuli. Her wrapper was tied tightly around her waist, and her eyes, usually full of sharp humor, were heavy with something different today. Worry, fear, and a kind of sadness that looked older than her wrinkles. Tunde, she whispered, glancing around as though the walls themselves could overhear. You should not be here. But Mama Elise wasn't at her window. His voice trembled. What happened? Aunty Mae sighed deeply, the way someone does when they have been carrying a secret too long. She motioned for him to follow her to the side of the house, where the shadows were longer, the air cooler, and the street noise distant. You see this woman, she began, looking toward the dark window. People talk about her, but they don't know her. Not really. Her eyes softened. I knew her when she first came to Mabuli. Before this house grew quiet. Before her life became smaller than that window. Tunde held the photograph tighter, the edges pressing into his palm. Who is the baby? He asked, almost afraid of the answer. Aunty Mae's eyes dropped to the picture. She inhaled sharply, not in surprise but in pain. That, she whispered, is her son. Tunde felt his chest tighten. Her son. But where is he now? Aunty Miriam shook her head slowly. Lost. Missing. Whatever word you choose, the meaning is the same. Her voice dropped even lower. And she has been waiting for him, for 32 years. Tunde froze. 32 years. Longer than he had been alive. Aunty Miriam continued, her tone trembling with memory. She came to this town carrying that child in her arms. She had fled from a life full of pain, full of betrayal. She wanted a new beginning. And for a while she had it. He paused. But when the boy was barely 5 years old, something terrible happened. One night during a festival, the child disappeared. Just vanished into the crowd. Some said he was kidnapped. Some said he wandered off. Others said her past had finally caught up with her. Tunde felt chills break across his skin. And since that day, she has waited at that window. Aunty Miriam nodded. She promised herself she would never leave that spot. Because in her heart, she believed her son would come looking for her. That he would walk down that street one day. And if she wasn't there, her voice cracked. She feared she would miss the moment she had been living for. Tunde swallowed hard. His fingers gripped the photograph even tighter. So what happened last night? Why didn't she come today? Aunty Miriam looked at him with sorrow-filled eyes. Last night she received a letter. A letter? Tunde whispered. She nodded. Delivered by someone who knocked at her door long after the town had slept. Tunde felt his heartbeat quicken. What did the letter say? Aunty Miriam looked away, her eyes glistening. It said her son might still be alive. The world around Tunde blurred. Alive. After 32 years. That single word changed everything. And the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Tunde stood frozen, the word alive echoing in his ears long after Aunty Miriam stopped speaking. It felt impossible, unbelievable. Yet something inside him whispered that Mama Elise had always known her story wasn't finished. That window wasn't a habit, it was hope. But hope, when carried alone for decades, becomes heavy. And now that weight had shifted. Aunty Miriam touched his shoulder gently. Tunde, she won't speak to many people. But she might speak to you. Why me? He asked, bewildered. Because sometimes, Aunty Miriam said quietly, life chooses listeners before storytellers. Her words lingered in the air as Tunde walked back toward the house, heart pounding. He stood at the front door, lifted his hand, and knocked softly. This time, after a long pause, he heard something. Slow footsteps, dragging, hesitant. The door opened a little, and there she stood. Mama Elise. Her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her eyes dim yet searching. She looked smaller up close, more fragile than he ever imagined. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Old soul and young soul meeting in the doorway of a story neither understood yet. I found this, Tunde said, holding out the photograph with shaking fingers. Mama Elise looked at it, and something inside her cracked. Her breath hitched, her hand trembled, and a soft, broken sound escaped her. Not quite a sob, not quite a sigh. Something between pain and relief. She opened the door wider. Come. Her voice was soft, like it hadn't been used in years. Inside her house, the air felt thick with memories. Old photographs lined the walls. Faded curtains hung like tired ghosts. The smell of lavender lingered, comforting yet lonely. She led him to the living room, but instead of sitting in the big chair, she sat on the edge of her window seat, as if she couldn't bear to be far from it. Tunde, she whispered, you want to know why I sit here? He nodded slowly. Her eyes lifted, deep, dark, filled with years of untold grief. This window, she said softly, is the last place he saw me. She looked out toward the street, her gaze drifting far beyond the present. When my son was born, he was my entire world. His father was not a good man. Controlling, violent, dangerous. Her voice trembled. I ran away from him. I took my baby and came here. I thought the danger was behind me. She swallowed hard. But when my son turned 5, that man found us. Tunde's breath caught. It was during the Lantern Festival, she continued, voice cracking. There were crowds, drums, laughter, and shadows. I let go of my son's hand for 1 second. 1 second. Tears pooled in her eyes. He disappeared into that crowd. And when I screamed his name, the only person who turned around was his father. Tunde felt chills race across his skin. He took my child, she whispered. And I never saw either of them again. Her tears fell silently, slow, heavy, the kind that had been waiting years to escape. But the last place my son saw me, she said, gently touching the window frame, was here, in this house. So I stay, every evening, because if he ever remembers anything, it will be this window, and he will know where to find his mother. Tunde felt his throat tighten painfully. And now, he asked softly, the letter. A fragile, trembling hope flickered in her eyes. The letter said my son may still be alive. Her voice grew even softer. After 32 years, I do not know if my heart is strong enough for the truth. Tunde took a deep breath as he realized. This wasn't just a story. It was a lifetime of love, loss, and hope. And now, finally, a chance for redemption. The air inside Mama Elise's home felt different now. Charged, trembling, as if even the walls themselves knew that after 32 long years of waiting, something was shifting. The letter sat on the table between them, unopened once more, its edges curled like it had traveled far, carrying stories no one had dared to speak aloud. Tunde watched her breathe. Slow, shaky breaths that looked like they had taken decades to settle. She reached for her shawl and pulled it tighter around her shoulders, as though bracing herself against memories that had waited too long in the dark. My son's name, she whispered, her voice breaking around the syllables, is Malik. It was the first time she had said the child's name out loud in front of Tunde. The name felt heavy, sacred, a name carved out of love and long nights of crying. When he was born, she continued, eyes softening with distant tenderness, he had the brightest eyes like little lanterns. He smiled early, even laughed early. People said he was a blessed child. Her lips trembled into a brittle smile. But I made him a promise on the night he was born, the kind of promise a mother makes with her whole soul. Tunde leaned in. What promise? She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory wash over her. That I would never leave him. Her voice came out fragile. That no matter what happened in this world, I would always be where he could find me. Her fingers brushed the window frame. This window, she said softly, became my vow. I believed, no, I knew, that one day Malik would remember me. That something in his heart would guide him back. And when he came, I would be right here. Not somewhere else. Not lost. Not gone. Tunde felt a pressure building in his chest, the weight of years pressing into this one room. He was only 5, she continued. He didn't understand why his father was hurting me. He didn't know why we lived in fear. But he knew this house, this street, this window. Her voice cracked. I couldn't save him, but I could wait for him. She turned toward Tunde, her eyes suddenly glossy but sharp with longing. You see, child, sometimes waiting becomes the only thing keeping a person alive. She laughed bitterly, a sound filled with both resignation and stubborn hope. And so I waited, days turning to months, months turning to years. People grew old. Children grew up. The world changed. Her eyes softened again, but my promise did not. The clock on the wall ticked, each breath stretching the silence between them. But last night, she whispered, for the first time in 32 years, I was afraid to sit at my window. Why? Tunde asked, voice barely a breath. Because the letter said Malik is looking for me, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. But it also said, he may not remember me. Her hands shook. Her voice trembled. And I do not know what scares me more, finding out he is gone forever, or meeting him and seeing no recognition in his eyes. She gently placed her hand on the table. Tunde, what if my waiting was for nothing? Tunde took a small, steadying breath. Mama, he said softly, A promise kept with love is never for nothing. Her eyes filled again, but this time with a fragile hope rekindling. The sun dipped behind the rooftops of Mabule, painting the sky in deep purples and fading gold. Inside the dimly lit living room, the letter lay between Mama Elise and Tunde like a bridge to a past neither fully understood. For 32 years she had waited, but now, for the first time, she faced a terrifying truth. Waiting was no longer enough. Now she had to search. Tunde watched her stare at the letter, her fingers hovering above it but never touching. Fear, hope, guilt, love, all swirling inside her like a storm she had carried alone for decades. Finally, she whispered, "What if he truly is out there, Tunde? What if Malik is alive?" Tunde felt something rise inside him, a courage that surprised even him. "Then we will find him, Mama. We start now." Her head snapped up slightly. No one had ever said we to her. She had been alone so long that the word felt strange, almost too gentle. Tunde opened the letter carefully. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, written by someone who had clearly traveled through hardship. It read, "If this finds you, know that Malik may still be alive. He was seen in a shelter in River Falls City 2 months ago. But he did not give his name, only said he was looking for an old house, with a window facing the street." A small gasp escaped Mama Elise's lips. She pressed her trembling hand to her mouth. "He remembers the window," she whispered, voice breaking. "After all these years, he remembers." That one line, just a few fragile words, carried everything she had prayed for through decades of tears. Tunde felt something shift in the room. This wasn't just sadness anymore. It was awakening, gentle but powerful. "We need clues," he said firmly. "Details. Anything that can help us find him." Mama Elise nodded slowly and stood up. It was the first time he had seen her rise without leaning on furniture. She walked, unsteady but determined, toward an old wooden trunk near her window. The trunk was dusty, its metal lock rusted, but her hands moved across it as if touching an old friend. Inside were pieces of a life she had sealed away. A tiny blue sweater Malik once wore. A birthday card he had scribbled on with clumsy handwriting. A hospital document with his birth details. And a faded photograph of the two of them smiling in front of the same window. Her fingers trembled as she handed Tunde the picture. "He looked like this," she whispered. "But now he must be a grown man. I do not know his face anymore." Tunde studied the child's bright eyes. "We start with these," he said. "We show them in River Falls City. Someone must have seen him." Mama Elise swallowed. "But Tunde, I am an old woman. I cannot travel far." Tunde looked her straight in the eyes. "Then I will go." Her breath caught. "You!" "I will search for him," Tunde said softly but firmly, "and I will bring him home to you." For the first time in 3 decades, Mama Elise's shoulders loosened. Hope, delicate and trembling, flickered to life. Outside, the night deepened, but inside that small house, something brighter than morning had begun. The search for Malik had officially begun. The morning light spilled gently across the courtyard, turning the dust into floating gold. Amelia sat beside Mama Ruth, who looked strangely calm, as if her heart had been waiting for this day longer than she had waited for breath itself. The old woman's trembling hands rested in her lap, but her eyes were steady, focused on the gate ahead. Because today, the search had found him. The man who stepped through the gate was not the young boy Mama Ruth had lost. He was older now, his shoulders broader, his face lined by the kind of battles life forces upon the abandoned and forgotten. But his eyes, those deep, almond-shaped eyes, held the reflection of hers. He stopped when he saw her. Mama Ruth's breath caught in her chest, but she did not cry. Not yet. She simply whispered, almost to the wind, "Emmanuel, my son." His jaw tightened, a storm of emotions crossing his face. Confusion, disbelief, hurt, yearning, and something softer. Something he had spent his whole life trying to hide. He took one uncertain step forward. "Are you," his voice cracked, "are you really my mother?" Mama Ruth nodded, slowly, painfully, as though every movement was stitched with memories she had buried deep inside her ribs. I am. And I have waited my whole life for the chance to tell you the truth. And to say I am sorry. The man closed his eyes as if the words hit a locked door inside him. When he opened them again, tears clung to the edges. Amelia watched silently. She had never seen hope and heartbreak stand so close together that they looked like siblings. Mama Ruth reached out a shaking hand. Emmanuel stared at it, hesitating, maybe afraid. Afraid that touching it would make everything real. Afraid it might break him. But then he took her hand. And it was as if the entire world exhaled. Mama Ruth let out a sob, the kind that comes from decades of silent suffering, decades of guilt she had carried alone. Her fingers closed around his like a mother holding her newborn for the first time, not understanding how the years had stolen so much from them both. My son, I never stopped looking for you. Not a day. Not a moment. Emmanuel dropped to his knees in front of her, resting his head against her lap. And I never stopped wondering who I came from, he whispered. Why no one came for me. Amelia felt the weight of those words in her bones. Mama Ruth bent forward, her forehead touching his hair. I didn't come because life was cruel to me, not because you were not wanted. You were always wanted. A long silence followed, one that didn't feel empty but full, overflowing with what had finally been found. When Emmanuel lifted his head again, something had shifted. The hardness in his face had softened. The distance in his voice had dissolved. I forgive you, he said. I don't know how, but I do. Mama Ruth closed her eyes. And just like that, two broken halves finally became whole again. The reunion did not erase their suffering. It did not rewrite the past. But it rewrote their future. Together. The days after the reunion felt different. Lighter, warmer. Almost as if the walls of Mama Ruth's small home had finally unclenched after years of holding in too many unspoken stories. But while the world around her softened, Mama Ruth herself grew quieter. Not weaker. Just reflective, like someone standing on the edge of a long journey and choosing to savor every remaining breath. Amelia noticed it first. Mama Ruth would sit by the window for hours, watching the sky, humming an old lullaby that even Amelia didn't recognize. Sometimes she would smile at nothing. Other times tears would escape without warning. One evening, Amelia found her writing in a small leather-bound notebook with a cracked spine. Words flowed slowly, shakily, like they came from a place deep inside her chest. When Amelia asked what she was writing, Mama Ruth only smiled and touched her hand. A gift, she whispered. For when I'm gone. But Amelia, stubborn in her love, shook her head. You're not going anywhere. Mama Ruth only looked at her with the tired eyes of someone who had lived more than one lifetime. A week later, Emmanuel returned. Not as a man searching for answers, but as a son finally coming home. He spent long afternoons repairing the old fence, fixing the creaking door, or simply sitting by Mama Ruth's side as she told him stories from a youth he never knew she had. Every moment felt like healing. Every conversation felt like stitching together years that had been torn apart. Then came the night when Mama Ruth knocked softly on Amelia's bedroom door. Come, she said. There is something you both must have. She walked slowly into the living room, her steps measured, her breath thin, but her spirit unshakably strong. She handed Emmanuel the leather notebook. For you, she said. My son. He looked confused at first, gently opening the cover. Inside were pages filled with her handwriting, letters written to the child she had lost, year after year, birthday after birthday. Messages full of longing, sorrow, love, and hope. I wrote to you every year, Mama Ruth said softly. Even when I didn't know if you were alive. I needed to keep you with me. In words, if not in life. Emmanuel pressed the book to his chest, his voice breaking. I don't deserve this. Mama Ruth touched his cheek. You deserve everything I couldn't give. Then she turned to Amelia and handed her a small wooden box carved with delicate patterns. Inside it lay a silver locket, simple, old, and worn from years of being held. "This," Mama Ruth said, "is for you, my daughter, not by blood, but by heart." Amelia's throat closed. "I can't take this." "You must," Mama Ruth replied gently. "Because you saved me. And you saved him." Her words trembled, but her smile was steady. That night, Mama Ruth fell asleep peacefully, her breathing slow and rhythmic as the soft night breeze brushed against the curtains. By morning she was gone, not in pain, not in fear, but in peace, with her son found, her truth shared, and her heart finally unburdened. Amelia and Emmanuel stood together, holding the two gifts she left behind, one written, one worn, both priceless. And in that moment they understood. Mama Ruth's final gift wasn't the notebook or the locket. It was the family she brought back together. Before she closed her eyes. For the last time,